On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1965. We're going to be taking a look at the Kinks, and they're going to be performing all day and all of the night. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So this video is the first one that I've done where I've revisited a performance that I have previously looked at to look at it again, because somebody did comment recently and said that on that first video I got a bit sidetracked with the history of the band and included a lot of information but didn't really get into the performance that much. So I am going to be doing that now. We'll be getting the guitar out later on. I'll probably jump into the performance as well to explain a few things, but it is rare in that this is a performance that was live on TV. Back in the 60s there were a lot of performances on TV that were played to a backing track, but here we have the guys playing live, so let's get them up on screen and see how they get on. Kinks! I'm just going to jump in here. You could have spotted a slight mistake there with Dave going to the wrong chord, and that is something that came up in a comment recently. Somebody mentioned about the fact that when Dave went to the chord it was incorrect, but I didn't mention it on the other video, so I mentioned it now. But when we get the guitar out a little bit later on, you'll see that it is forgivable because of the fact that he's going right up his guitar. I think 13th fret will be at, in order to keep the full bar chord position. It's really tough higher up the neck because the frets get smaller and get closer together, so trying to fit in full bar chord shapes is going to be tricky, but I will demonstrate that later on. And by the way, Dave Davies is the name. I do mention this in the other video. I'm going to put that at the end of this video, so you guys can click on that for all of the background information that I got into on that video. Another discussion that's been happening on the feed of that previous video is about distortion and overdrive and fuzz, and the fact that because of Dave's guitar sound it did stand out, because believe it or not, back in the mid-60s, this was a really heavy sound, and by nowadays standards, it does sound really clean, but this is a result of, I think, Dave slashing his amp and the cone in his amp in order to damage it to get this sound. I have heard different stories about that being the case, but then also not being the case, and the fact that he just turned it up really loud. I'm not going to get into too much technical information about distortion in this video, but just to mention that it did come about in the 50s due to the fact that players, when they used old amps and damaged amps, it started to get this distorted quality, and some people liked the sound, so they started to work on the fuzz box, and that's what it was called back in the 50s, early 60s as well. 1962 was the first commercially available fuzz box, and fuzz was seen as distortion, which is seen as overdrive, so it's all the same thing, and fuzz is what it was called. But this took it to another level, believe it or not, because we're so used to it now. But having this sound really made the Kinks stand out and gave the music so much attitude. So just getting into the guitar parts, rhythm-wise, to begin with, we will look at the lead at the end of the video after we've jumped into it and heard it. But from a rhythm perspective, we've got really quick changes here, and they are full bar chord positions. So you can either play with your thumb over the top, this, like that, or Dave, as he's playing, with the first finger and the thumb behind the neck rather than over the top. So we've got this change. If we're going all the way from the intro, we've got the F and a quick jump up to our G. Then we'll go back down again, and we're jumping up to the A sharp and then back down to the G. And that's going to be it for our verse. We've got this like that. So you just have to make sure you jump to the right frets. The other thing to point out is the fact that Dave is supplying backing vocals at the same time as making these jumps, so it is going to double the difficulty. When we get into the pre-chorus, we go to an A sharp again, but you can access it there on that first fret if you want to. And then we're going over to an F, and rhythm wise we want to be pretty involved with the up and down strokes. We've got this, and also there's a little bit of double time when we make this. It's that kind of thing. So Dave is quite involved with his rhythm there. And it's all about filling out the sound, because for the most part, Dave's guitar we can hear quite high in the mix, but we've then got Ray's guitar as well. When he's supplying those vocals, he's playing lightly in the background, but more prominently when the solo kicks in, because that's at the point at which Ray is then filling in the sound underneath Dave's solo. So getting back into that rhythm, into the F, and then we have this quick jump to exactly the same progression and shifts that we had previously, but now starting in A. So we've got this like that. And once we get to that point, we're now into the chorus. And this is the point at which Dave messes up the chord a little bit, because jumping to these tiny frets is really difficult with this full bar chord shape. You need to have small fingers. So in the chorus, we've got this, that kind of thing. And there's more downstrokes from a rhythm perspective. So we want to be going more like that kind of thing. And don't worry if it sounds a little bit rough and a bit nasty, because that's how you want to be playing it. That's the sound. It's got that attitude in there. We're not going for a pristine chord each time. It's just more about the aggression to get the attitude into that playing. So once you've played through the chorus, we're then back down to the G. And those are the chords that you're going to need for the verse, the pre-chorus, the chorus. But let's get back into the performance. There's only just over a minute to go, and we'll jump into the lead work at the end as well. And there we have it. So the lead that we have going on there, this is going to be all in your minor pentatonic shape 1. And here you can be forgiven for thinking that you want to be playing in the major key, because of the fact that we've got our G major down to the F major, and also that A sharp major as well. But we've got this. So now that you can see the fretboard and we are full screen, we've got this little technique going on. I am palm muting a little bit because the amount of distortion I've got is probably more than they had here, even though people thought this was really heavy. And that technique of just hammering on from the 3rd fret to the 5th fret, 1st finger, 3rd finger, little upstroke with your pick to get your 1st finger on that 3rd fret of the G string, and you want to bar that down so that you've got the notes that you want already, without having to go and try and move your fingers over that. And it's all about that upstroke with the right hand, so that we go down, hammer on, up, down, hammer on, up. Because it means you'll then be able to follow the notes on a lot faster and not really have to do much work with that left hand. So we also have a little slide into the shape, for example, where we have that little phrase there starts with that slide. And bend and barring that 1st finger on the 3rd fret. And a little bend here on the 6th fret. And then we move all the way up to the octave. And we want to slide all the way up here. Like that. And we're going... I think he starts in that kind of vein, and then... And also, we've got this same technique down here, but an octave higher. So he plays through that as well. And it's a great little idea and tip to take whatever you're doing, the octave below, an octave higher. And as I always say, your guitar starts again on the 12th fret. So just follow the dots, and we know that we're on our 1st dot. And when you've got this, and you want to move up, we can do exactly the same thing. You can see how I've changed my fingering here because it's a lot tighter, higher up the fretboard, but it's all the same notes, all the same techniques that you'll be going for. And if I wanted to go, do a little bend there, exactly the same. So you can literally just copy and paste your playing. Just to throw in there as well, that the lead playing that Dave is doing here isn't of a low standard. A lot of bands in the 60s, if they ever did have a lead guitar solo, it might be quite basic, just single notes and no real lead technique in terms of the kind of Chuck Berry. It takes a lot of practice to get that down, to get the B string, the high E string to ring out, and also to get the bend, and also taking that up an octave. So everything that Dave's doing here is really impressive because it's so clean, and again, I'm dirtier tone-wise than they are in the performance, so that it's probably what he's got to work with. And fitting the fingers in there can get really tight, but just getting it all to ring out nice and cleanly, but getting into the playing and the rhythm and the singing as well. There's so much that is flying under the radar here because of the fact that we are totally live. Pete Quaife as well on bass, holding it down with Mick on drums. I always say that foundation is what everything's then built upon from that rhythm section. So the fact that you've got to be tight to pull this thing off live, but a really cool performance here and a tiny little mistake by Dave. And I love to hear that kind of thing because then you know it's totally live, and also the way that he reacts to it and just has a smile, and you can tell that they're enjoying themselves on stage, and that is what live performance is all about, and just watching great musicians expressing themselves, because if they're not enjoying it, then you won't enjoy watching it. So it's great to see these guys in full flow in a live setting, but also if you do want to pick up a guitar and play through what Dave is doing here and try and supply that harmony vocal, you'll realize how hard it is to get all of these jumps spot on, because you will be having to look at your fretboard to make sure that you nail the positions. And even then, when you are higher up for the chorus, you have to supply a harmony vocal. So it means that when you are jumping up, you've got your mic where you have to get your position correct. And if you're not in position, you won't hear the vocal, which means you have to sacrifice looking at your fretboard. I think you can only really appreciate it when you have a go at doing it yourself, and you'll realize how good these guys are, and how good Dave is, not only with rhythm, singing, but also that lead guitar. Like I said, it's on a different level to some of the lead guitar that you did hear in bands in the 60s. So I don't want this video to go on for too long, as it is effectively the part 2 of a video that I've done previously, but I hope you guys enjoyed it, and now you know the chords and all of the stuff that's being played. Maybe you can appreciate it on a little bit more of a deeper level than that first analysis that I did. But thank you guys so much for watching and for requesting a relook at this one. If you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Keep those suggestions coming in the comments below, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!